97.1 FM Talk.
On demand audio.
I have not visited with Jerry Baker. I'm a big fan of Jerry's. I love his work at the Wall Street Journal. He is an editor at large, writes a column on a regular basis. We'll talk Iran and some things related to New York with Jerry after 5 o'clock. And then, Sue, I don't know if you saw this story in the local paper about the population growth and, St. Louis is not heading in the right direction.
Right.
It begs the question, how long can this city actually survive or how can it rebound? And I have this dinner like quarterly with Jeff Rainford, who's the mayor's former chief of staff for Mayor Slay, and Rex Singfield, who's involved in a lot of issues. And we had dinners about 2 months ago, and we talked about this very topic. So piggybacking off the article in our local paper, which I think was in Monday's edition, probably in Tuesday's printed edition because they have to print it in Columbia. But Jeff's going to weigh in on that in the next hour, plus we'll have audio cut of the day. On the topic of reporters, local rabble-rouser, retired Fox 2 investigative reporter Elliot Davis back with us this afternoon to talk about several topics. Elliot, how are you? Good afternoon. Hope you're surviving the heat.
I'm doing great. I think I'm the busiest retired guy in St. Louis.
You seem to be from your Facebook post. And I mentioned the heat because, look, we've talked about this the last couple of days. I can't even imagine having to work outside. We sit here and quite candidly, we bitch about how cold our studio is because it's 68 degrees. I have to wear a hoodie a la John Fetterman every day. But I can't even imagine being out there and having to work in this. But I know you're working with some of the homeless people who are out there and they don't even have shelters from some of this as well. That's one of your motivations right now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been out there since the heat wave began. Been taking ice, cold water, and yesterday it was Gatorade. But we started Monday taking items out, and I think a number of people are doing that too. But when I get there, there's usually no ice left, nothing. And so we go and we get 20 or 30. We've been increasing it each day, the number of bags of ice that we take out there because the people, it's just a scorcher. Obviously, and the people, it is a real struggle out there, as I deal with all the folks. So that's what I've been doing. Like I said, I've done it 2 days so far, getting ready to do a third. A lot been going on today. But one of the things that I've been saying, and I'm going to be a kinder, gentler Elliot today.
Look at that. Wow.
Yeah,
Are we prepared for that? That's interesting.
So,
go ahead, though. I want to hear this.
I'm getting ready to launch this kinder, gentler Elliot. That you haven't seen it yet. But one of the things I've said, Mark, is that the city has done nothing for the people in the homeless encampment. I would have thought that the city or the mayor or somebody or the mayor would have directed our city agencies. I'm not saying she has to do everything because she's got a ton of things, but she has people working for her. Nobody had been out there from the city to do anything. And there's 46 people at this homeless encampment. And so
where is it, by the way? Because it used to be over by the dilapidated courts building in City Hall, then that came down, and then they kind of moved here to this park that's immediately to the west of where we sit at Park Pacific between 13th and 14th Street right off Olive, but I haven't even seen them out there in, the last week or so.
10th and Cass.
Okay.
And there are about 46 people who stay there, bunch of tents set up. Like I said, it's about 46 folks. It's actually growing. And so my contention is that the city certainly could go check on these people, send your health department people out there, make sure no one has medical issues, send human services out there to pass out bottles. I have consistently been calling on Mayor Kara Spencer to go out there. Even before the tornado, I said, look, I talked to the leaders of the encampment. They wanted to be able to meet the mayor to tell her what's going on. Here's what we need, because we couldn't get anything under Tashara Jones when she was the mayor. That's why I'm paying $500 a month for a dumpster for everybody so they can have trash.
No, what you got from Tashara was fencing around City Hall and Pelker Park and the courts building for like 18 months. That's what you got from her.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But Kara is not doing anything for them either. And so we're going through heat. And I always say, just like when we started talking about the Ram settlement money, and I initially started saying, hey, the city should spend that money, some of it anyway, and they finally, of course, came around. But my feeling is that if you're not going to go out there and check on these people when there is a heat wave with temperatures reaching 100 degrees, when are you going to get a homeless program? When are you going to check on people who are homeless in the city, and this is a big encampment.
Okay,
so
but
I've been going out there and I've been calling on the mayor to do the same.
that is a valid. I understand your point on that, but what happens, and I go way back to the 1980s with Larry Rice in the homeless situation when I was in Columbia as I was a budding journalist, and obviously Larry's name is not mentioned as much in coordination with this right now. But it's always been a situation, in my eyes, and you tell me if this is wrong, that there are opportunities for the homeless population to go into shelters to seek, relief from the heat and get food. But a lot of the folks that are in the encampments, they don't want to do that because they don't want to play by the rules and they just refuse to do it. So isn't there that component that exists a little bit as well?
Let me answer that question. Many of them, they carry all their belongings on their back, and often they can't bring their belongings into the shelter. And if they leave it someplace, they risk their stuff getting stolen. That's why a lot of them don't go into the shelter. So if you had to carry all the contents of your house around every place you went, and that was on your back, and then they said, okay, you can come to the library, but you can't bring all your stuff in the library. So what choice what do you make? What do you do? And so all the valuables, valuable to you, all the stuff that you have is on your back. You can't bring that. If you leave it outside, it's going to get stolen. If you leave it in a tent, it could get stolen. And so people make those kinds of choices.
And I get that as
well.
well.
Just like we interviewed the lady who was lost her house in the tornado. Tornado flattened her house, and she pitched a tent right next to her house. Didn't want to leave her stuff.
I understand that aspect too, but what was the intersection over by Chippewa and Ted Drew's where somebody basically just camped out in front of this person's house and they were there for like years, and it was basically on the area that the homeowner didn't own, the city owned, the city didn't do anything about that. So you do have situations where actual homeowners are affected by these things as well, and then residents don't feel safe if they're coming downtown. I know I've seen a lot of drug activity with the homeless people. It's outside of the homeless people as well, even in this little 3-block area where we work here. So that's also a concern when these things happen, I think.
Yeah, it is. When you get into a residential area, that's a whole different animal over there. When you're talking about those situations, someone's camped out in front of a house. These people are kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
There's vacant lots all around them. So it's not like they're in the middle of a neighborhood. They're on this vacant lot, and they're there with the permission of the landowner. It's a privately owned part of land. And so I'm saying, as long as they're not in a neighborhood, right? And so as long as you have these 46 people out there, they're human beings too, and they should have. If we're paying all this money to the city is getting like $17 million a year to help the homeless.
Yeah, what are they doing with it? Right. It's a resources issue. Yeah, I get it.
By
the way, when you first came on, you said, I'm taking ICE. I thought you meant you were taking ICE agents out there, around the city. You kind of shocked me there. I do want your opinion on Sheriff Montgomery. A.G. Bailey was in the studio with me in the last hour. He's trying to file a quo warranto, as they say, quo warranto, which they did with Kim Gardner. He did that today to remove him from office. Have you been on that story?
Of course I have.
Of course.
I was at his news conference today, but I think I'm the only reporter to sit down in a one-on-one interview with the sheriff, and we did that on Friday. So I actually did get a chance to talk to him as well, one-on-one, and ask him all the questions I wanted.
Is what he has done, it's been well documented on this show, on local media, in STL Today, you've talked about it, are his decisions and his behavior defensible in any way?
He made some bad decisions.
Okay, well, at least we can agree on that, right?
I mean, there's no rolling golden dice
for someone's job.
For someone to keep their job.
Yeah.
Handcuffing the jail commissioner, deputy jail commissioner, because you want to get in to interview somebody. Getting rid of all the people who the predecessors folks when you come into office, and then by doing so you blow a $400,000 hole in your budget, telling the city, well, we're not going to haul medical people who need to go to emergency room anymore. We're not going to carry them. I mean, so how are they supposed to get to the hospital? They're in jail. They can't just walk out the door and go themselves. So just a lot of things. And then when you've got that big a hole in your budget, right, you're saying, okay, I don't have money to carry these inmates to the hospital. I got no money for that. But I can get a $56,000 Chevy
SUV.
Volt.
Right. So going back to my question, Elliot, I mean, were his answers, and I apologize, I haven't watched the interview, were his answers in any way, shape, or form feasible?
Not really.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a no.
I guess let me take that. It's probably feasible to him,
Right.
but to me, listening to it, a lot of it just did not make sense.
Yeah.
It's not what and I asked him, and he was gracious enough to sit down and talk to me. But I asked him, I said, but who? One thing like he did with the $30,000 for 250 new gold badges, and I just said, well, who does that? And I asked.
And what did he say? He says, I do.
Said.
Yeah.
Well, and he proceeded to give me this long answer for it. But there are a lot of number of things and answers, and this is what the Attorney General was saying. But the Attorney General, as you know, you talked to him, he went one step further. He has about, 8 different things down or something. And he says any one of them, he says, would be grounds to throw the sheriff out of office. Sheriff believes he can defend all of this stuff.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I do not have a lot of time, so I probably only have like a minute and a half, and I'd love to get your thoughts, though. I had Governor Kehoe on last night. I candidly was a little disappointed with the appointments to the St. Louis Police Board, which was just, announced a couple of days ago. Your thoughts on that? And, obviously there's complaints from a bunch of different sides, I think, on this one.
I think since the city is half black, then the police board should have been half minority. That's my opinion. And I think that there should have been some agreed upon, civic leaders. That doesn't mean you can't have business people on. But, I would have liked to have seen some other people on, like a Mike McMillan, for example, on the police board. And some people that the community, the African-American community can say, okay, here's our guy. We don't expect to get everybody on. I do like the fact that he picked Sonia Jenkins Gray, because I did stories on her when she was battling Tashara. So that's a personal deal. I like her on.
Well, and I understand that, but it was 5 white guys and business owners and then her, right?
And so there's nobody really that the community really knows, on that board. Nobody's going to say, oh, yeah, I know them. Okay. They've got some gravitas. And not taking anything away from the people that they pick, but I think when you got a city that has black and you got a police department that's going to be dealing with 80% or 70% black suspects in a lot of these cases, homicides and other, the Board of Police Commissioners should have reflected the community. This one doesn't.
I am not a quota person, but I do not disagree with you on that particular issue. So I was a little surprised, but we'll have to see. The governor defended those choices last night on this show. Elliot, great to have you on. Keep on them. I appreciate it.
Always good.
All right,
thank you, buddy.
Take care.
Get more at 971talk.com.